begin this evening by joining in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the study of the parables of Jesus, and this, I think, is the second to the last one that is on the list of parables that are on the Bible class list. So this one is entitled The Talents. It's found in the 25th chapter of Matthew, the middle of that chapter. So before we read the parable or get into it, we'll just go a little bit into the background of the time frame of the parable took place and kind of what was happening in the life of Jesus at that time. So this was nearing the end of his public ministry, and these chapters from 21 onward in Matthew cover that time period from Jesus' final entry into Jerusalem and all the events that took place in Jerusalem regarding his teaching, his suffering, death, and resurrection, and so on. So in the beginning of that 21st chapter of Matthew, he is arriving in Jerusalem for the last time. And that's at the time where the people threw palm leaves on the way, and when he came in, they sang, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." And some of the people were distraught. Of course, the chief priests and Pharisees were pretty upset that the people were reacting that way when Jesus was arriving in Jerusalem. But once Jesus was there, he went to the temple, which was his custom to do. And when he arrived at the temple, there were these people that, of course, it was a time of a festive time in Jerusalem. One of the festivals was taking place. I don't remember which one this was, but anyway, so when these festivals took place, people had to have some sort of offering, and they had their own currency, and then they had to exchange it for the currency of, I guess, the city of Jerusalem, and in order to purchase their offering. And so the people were setting up these money exchange tables, and then they would charge them a fee to exchange the money. And they had done that earlier in the life of Jesus in his public ministry. He had come into Jerusalem, and they were doing the same thing at that time, and he chased them out of there. And now they had come back after Jesus had gone away. They had set up shop again in the temple in Jerusalem, and he once again chased them out. He said, "You people have made this temple a den of thieves." And that's not the purpose of the temple. It's to praise and glorify God. So then Jesus spends the next few days teaching in the temple. These are, again, the last days of his life, and there's many people that come, and he addresses them. And I've got just kind of a list of, to give you a flavor of the kind of people he was addressing. The chief priests and elders, disciples, the Pharisees, Sadducees, and just the multitude of people that were there. So after a few days of teaching in the temple, then he leaves the temple and he goes to this mount where there are a bunch of olive trees, and they call that the Mount of Olives. And so while he was sitting there on the Mount of Olives, or as he left the temple, the disciples came out and they were showing him the buildings around the temple, kind of, I suppose, showing off, so to speak. And Jesus said, "Not one stone shall be left upon the other of these buildings. They will all crumble and fall one day." So then Jesus goes to the Mount of Olives. And the disciples followed him there, and they said, "Well, when are these things going to happen?" And then Jesus embarks on a long speech with his disciples, took place on Mount of Olives, and they call it the Olivet Discourse. So because of the length of the speech and where it took place. And he's predicting telling them what is going to take place from here going forward. And so for that reason, some people have called it the little apocalypse. So then the 24th chapter of Matthew gives a bunch of signs of what's going to be taking place from here going forward for the disciples. And this, I'll just read just a few verses here to give kind of a flavor of that. So after, going back here, after the disciples asked Jesus, "When shall these things be?" And Jesus answered them, and he said unto them, "Take heed that no man deceive you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and will deceive many. And then you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for all of these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places. All of these things are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another." And so on. It goes on for, again, many verses, but it just kind of gives you a flavor of Jesus' speech on the Olivet Discourse. So then he ends that long speech with 4 parables. And the first one was probably covered a few weeks back, called the Wise and Faithful Servant. And in that parable, remember, if you were here then, I wasn't here myself. I don't think I heard it online either. But anyway, when the Lord delays his coming, there's two different types of servants. One is faithful and he takes care of his fellow servants, and the other one gets tired of waiting and takes advantage of the situation and begins to beat his fellow servants. And then last week was the parable of the 10 virgins. While they were waiting for the bridegroom to come, the bridegroom delays his coming in order to create this air of suspense. And nobody knows when he's going to come. And the virgins got tired, and they all slumbered and slept. And 5 were ready. They had oil on their lamps, and 5 were not. And so those were the first 2 of this series of 4 parables, and then talents we're covering today, and next week will be the Last Judgment. So at the end of this parable of the 10 virgins, again, the bridegroom delays his coming, so nobody knows when he's coming, and some were ready, some were not, and so this is kind of a transitional verse between the parable of the 10 virgins and the parable of the talents. And so Jesus says, "Watch therefore, For ye know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. And then he goes into the parable of the talents. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2, and to another 1. Every man according to his several ability. And then straightway took his journey. Then he that had received 5 talents traded with those same talents, and he made them 5 other talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained another 2. But he, the one that had received 1 talent, and he digged it into the earth, and he hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with his servants, or with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 more talents. And his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents, and behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. And his Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he that had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid the talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. Or in other words, there is your talent that you gave to me. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and faithful servant, or slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I had sowed not, and I gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. Cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So just a little bit about the talent. This parable is about the talents. And the talent in the Bible usually refers to, it's not some type of a skill set that we have that we think of when we hear talent, but it is typically a weight of something. And in the monetary sense, it's a weight of something, some sort of something that's valuable, like gold or silver, some sort of a precious metal that's worth some value. And some have suggested that 1 talent is comparable to a year's wages, to give an example or some idea of what they're referring to in this parable. So regardless, depending on where you're, what location you're at, or what area you're at that time, a talent could represent a different weight or scale, but regardless, it was a significant value, and that was familiar to the listeners of Jesus. So, then going into the parable, it talks about there's a man who has some servants. He's apparently a wealthy man because he has those servants. And he's going to be leaving for a long period of time. So while he's gone, he's going to leave the responsibility of his empire, or whatever you want to think of it, farm or whatever. He's going to leave the responsibility with his servants. And as typical, normal, his servants are his employees. You might want to think of them as they have various levels of skill, different skill sets, you might say. So in this parable, that a wealthy man is representing Jesus. Jesus, we know, has lived on this earth according to the Bible. He's lived on this earth, and he's gone into heaven. He's been gone for a long time. And Jesus was delivering this parable, telling them, this is what it's going to be like, the kingdom of heaven. I'm going to be leaving. I'll be gone for a long time. And then there's a number of different examples. So Jesus is then leaving the duty or the work here on this earth with his followers or his disciples. So as we heard, the servants were given different levels of responsibility based on their skill set. 1 5 talent, 1 2 talent, and 1 talent. So the one that had 5 talents, he took advantage of the money, not to his own advantages, but he went out and made a profit. He used that money that he had got from his Lord, so to speak, or his owner, or whatever you want to call it. And he used that to gain more profit. And so, as it said in the parable, and so he that had received the 5 talents, he came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained 5 beside them. I've gained beside them 5 more talents. And his Lord said, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee a ruler over many. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So the next one had been given 2 talents, and the story is the same. The value is quite a bit different. 2/5 basically is what it is. So it's much less than half of the value of the first one, and his profit was the same. He doubled his profit basically, but it was much less than the first one. And the reaction of the owner of the Lord was the same. So his Lord said unto him again, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. And so these 2 servants had done which was expected of them to do. And the last parable that I had here from Luke 17, that one ended with this statement, which is similar to what Jesus is saying here. His Lord said, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. So they had taken that money and used it, but that was kind of an expectation of them. So they had been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many. And so in the last parable that I had, it ended with this way. So likewise, when ye shall have done all of those things which are commanded unto you, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. And so that's what these two servants did. But this was what happened. They were able to enter into the joy of their Lord because they were faithful to him. But then the last one, the one with one talent, he went and hid it. So that was typical in like another parable, the treasure hidden in a field. In that case, they had got a valuable treasure, and they bought a field, and they went and hid the treasure in the field to protect it. So that was kind of a typical thing that they did in those days to protect something, is they'd go and hide it in a field. They'd dig a hole, bury the treasure, keep track of where it was at, and protect it in that way. So that's what this individual here with the one talent did. He that had received one talent, he came and said to the Lord, I knew thee, that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid the talent in the earth, and lo, there thou hast, that is thine. Or in other words, I'm giving you back what you gave me, that one talent. So it's interesting that this, his perspective of Jesus was that he was a hard man. So if we look in another place in the Bible, it gives us the opposite instruction or perspective. Here found in the 11th chapter of Matthew, Jesus says, Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So that doesn't give the perspective of being a hard man. But this individual obviously didn't trust in Jesus. He didn't trust in his ability to go out and use that money to do the work of his owner or Lord in this case, and looked at him as a hard man. And so Jesus answers, or his Lord in this case in the parable, he answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knowest that I reap where I sow not, and I gather where I have not strawed. Or in other words, he's saying, well, that is your perspective of me. You know that I'm a hard man, and then I go out and I reap where I haven't sowed, and I gather where I haven't strawed. That's your perspective. If that's your mindset, then he says, Thou shouldest therefore have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming should have received mine own with usury, or with some, what do you call it when you get from a bank, interest, some sort of interest. At least you'd get a little bit. But this particular individual was just lazy. He didn't trust in the Lord, and now he was making his excuses. He just buried that so it'd be safe, and then he didn't have to worry about it, didn't have to do anything while the Lord was gone, and he could give it back to him when he came back. But so then here's what happens to him. He says, "Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and shall have abundance." Or if you look at it from this perspective, unto everyone that hath faith, for example, shall be given, and he will have abundance. But from him that shall hath not, or doesn't have any faith, it shall be taken away, even that which he hath. Cast the unprofitable servant into utter darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the two previous parables, and this one as well, are giving examples of the Lord going away, and there's going to be a long period of time, and many things will happen during that period of time. And his encouragement is that we wouldn't lose hope during that time, and we'd be useful. So in the parable of the good and wicked servant, there was that long wait, and it illustrated how one persevered and he took care of his fellow servants, and his response or his benefit at the end was positive, just like the two in this parable. And the other one, he took advantage of the situation and he beat on his fellow servants, and he also was cast into outer darkness. And then on the 10 virgins, again, there was a long wait. They all slumbered and slept, but 5 of them were ready and 5 were not. So both of them implied the need to be ready and watchful for when Jesus comes again. Or I'd say all 3 of them. And this parable also implies a long wait, but it gives another characteristic, I guess, or another example of what should happen during that time period. It encourages us not to just sit idle and wait for the second coming and do nothing. When Jesus left this earth, he was on a high hill, and he was just ready to rise up into heaven. And this was kind of his command to his disciples that were around him. Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. And so this is known as the mission command. So that was delivered to the disciples, and then is passed on to his followers all the way to our generation and beyond. So I'll just give a few examples of this idea of where Jesus teaches that we don't want to just sit idle while waiting for the second coming. We'll just read some of the things that Jesus recommends, or teaches, rather. So here is found in the 2 Thessalonians. It says, Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly. So don't hang out with the ruffians, so to speak. and not after the tradition which he received of us. For yourselves know how ye ought to follow us, for we have behaved not ourselves disorderly among you. Neither did we eat any man's bread for naught or for nothing, but we wrought with labor and travail night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you, or we don't owe you anything. So we're working for our daily bread, not just taking free handouts, so to speak. Not because we have not power, but to make ourselves an ensample unto you to follow us. For even when we were with you, this we command you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now to them that are such, we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. Then in the 10th chapter of Proverbs, I just listed a couple of verses here, but it goes on and gives a lot of advice, I guess, to how we shouldn't be just sitting around idle. So in the 10th chapter, starting with the 5th verse, it says here, he that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Blessings are upon the head of the just, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. He that walketh uprightly walketh surely, but he that perverteth his ways shall be known. Hatred stirreth up strifes, but love covereth all sins. And then, of course, it continues on for many verses. And then from 1 Corinthians here in the New Testament, there's a couple examples. There would be many that we could pull out, but I'll just list a few here. So 1 Corinthians 15. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. For as much as ye have known that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. And then in John 4:34, Jesus saith unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. And then here at the bottom here is when Jesus was gathering his disciples, putting them to work, so to speak. So now, as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said unto them, come ye after me, and you will become fishers of men. So that is the purpose of what we should be doing while we're waiting here. Fishers of men. And then finally here in Matthew 25, this is actually the next parable. And the king shall answer and say unto them, I'm not going to go into all this because it's next week's parable, but the king shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So that was all I had prepared. So Yeah, basically, I guess summarizing the parable, it's a parable where Jesus has left his own here on this earth to do the work which has been entrusted for us to do. One other piece of advice that Jesus had given to the rich young man. He said to the rich young man, just trying to think of the context, when the rich young man was having a conversation with Jesus about keeping the commandments, and Jesus said, the first commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And so that contains all of the commandments there. So we love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind, and then we love our fellow servants here upon this earth. And it is our duty to, you could say, share the gospel with our fellow mankind. Okay. Does anybody have any discussion? Looks like we have some time if there's any comments. I think Essa had last week gave some illustrations too. I don't remember exactly what he was referring to, but that was with keeping oil in your lamps. He mentioned things like going to services and prayer would be one thing. Bible class, it's not as a work, but as something to support our life of faith and support others. Okay, Dennis.